You spent a year in the hospital when you were quite young.
Yes.
In a sanitarium, as a matter of fact,
Right.
with suspected tuberculosis. And you've said that that gave you a new respect for the preciousness of life.
Well, the most interesting experiences, I think, in my life have come through illnesses. I've learned something through them. I think the most important things I've learned in my life have come as the result of illnesses. As a kid in a public sanitarium, seeing other kids around me, not all of whom got well, and some of whom had to be carried out, I naturally developed a tremendous longing for life as it might be lived outside the sanitarium. And I discovered at that time that the body has a way of finding its own way, and that the things that you want to do generally bring you where you want to go. As a kid of 14, I think I weighed 78 pounds. And I think that's why I got into baseball. It represented a chance to do what other kids were doing. I had a 25-cent a week allowance then, as I remember it, and I would pay it to other kids to throw me grounders or bat fungos to me. 3 years later, I discovered that I was playing reasonably good baseball and eventually played some semi-pro ball. But I owed a great debt to baseball and to the discipline it required. It's a game of split-second timing. If played correctly, you've got to put everything you've got into it. You've got to learn how to concentrate. But the desire to do that, as I say, came out of my illness. I grew very rapidly, gained a lot of weight, eventually too much of it. But then later in life, as I think you recall, 8 or 9 years ago, I had a mysterious illness that...
You just returned from the Soviet Union.
That's right. And rapidly became paralyzed. And it was systemic. There were nodules on my body which indicated a malignancy. And once again, it became clear to me that I couldn't depend on the doctors, that this was something that I have to do for myself. And I was absolutely confident.
How did you do it for yourself?
Well, at the point that I discovered that it was serious, and I did this just by accident, by happening to see a letter that my doctor had left to another doctor whom he wanted to consult on the case. For the first time, I realized that he thought they might lose me. And then I realized I had some responsibility. I better get interested in this thing. So I thought back over the last 6 months, and it seemed to me that what had happened during that time was that I was involved in a progressive case of adrenal exhaustion, and that there was an episode in the Soviet Union when after a particularly trying time as chairman of a delegation, it was pretty frustrating, all that night there were diesel trucks passing by. It was the window was, we were on just the second floor, and the room kept filling up with this diesel smoke, and I became ill that night, and insisted on coming back the next day, and that led to various symptoms. And suddenly, when I thought back, as I say, in the hospital, on what had happened, I realized that these two episodes might have had something to do with it. First, the case of the adrenal exhaustion, and then second, the fact that the body, which ordinarily might have been able to meet the invasion of all those black hydrocarbons, wasn't able to do so.
So you drew upon a rational self-analysis.
And I discussed this with my doctor, who felt that it was a reasonable basis for speculation, especially since my symptoms were similar to those that are produced by heavy metal poisoning. Well, in thinking about that, I realized that there was one book that I had read, two books in fact, that might have had a bearing on the case. One was a book by Hans Selye on stress. My wife went to the library and got the book, and there I found it, and where he talked about the problems of adrenal exhaustion, especially combined with invasion, and the problem of corticoids, and there I was seeing my symptoms. His theory, of course, was that the body undergoes negative chemical changes as the result of the negative emotions. The negative emotions being fear, frustration, stress, suppressed rage, of which I'd had a fair share. And then it seemed to me that if the body on the negative side develops a negative chemistry, that it stood to reason that on the positive side it would produce a positive chemistry. Well, what were the positive emotions? Love, hope, faith, laughter. And not all of these were beyond my reach. And so I informed my doctor that I was going to we were going to leave the hospital, because I realized that a hospital may have certain virtues, but it's no place for someone to be sick in. It just doesn't give you the repose that you need.
And the positive value that you're looking for.
And so I made some interesting discoveries. I had plenty of hope and plenty of love. As for laughter, this is something that was not beyond my means. And at night, we showed some of the funniest films that we could rent. And I made the very interesting discovery that 10 minutes of good belly laughter would give me 2 hours of pain-free sleep. And I got rid of the painkillers, the codeine, the sleeping pills. They were giving me 36 aspirin a day. And I got rid of that and went with the things that I believed in. And as I say, I discovered that that laughter did produce a natural body anesthesia. It was a very exhilarating discovery. I had a good doctor, a very good doctor, who recognized that unless the patient becomes engaged in his own cure of something serious, there's not too much he can do. Mm-hmm. This is Bill Hitzig, a great guy. Mm-hmm. And so, far from holding me back, he encouraged me. Mm-hmm. I'd known him for a long time, and he had been exposed to some of my speculations on life and health. And then the second thing I did was this was before appalling in vitamin C. Mm-hmm. It seemed to me that since there was so much inflammation in my tissues, that we did need something to meet that particular problem, and I felt that vitamin C might be worth trying for several reasons. First, it had a role to play in adrenal activity. Second, it helped to provide oxygenation for the cells in the body, two things that were clearly involved in my paralysis. And third, it would help to reduce inflammation. I asked Hitzig what the largest dose of vitamin C was that he'd ever given a patient, or that he knew had been given. And at that time, this was 8 or 9 years ago, they had records of 3,000 units by injection. But as I thought about that, it didn't seem to make complete sense, because the body can absorb only so much vitamin C, and it will excrete that which it doesn't need. So it seemed to me that there might be a coefficient of time, which is how much can the body absorb in a given period of time. And so the injection system didn't seem to be the ideal way of doing it. And I asked Bill if he would give me vitamin C through intravenous drip, slow drip over a period of hours. But instead of giving me 3,000 units, to try experiment with 10,000 units. And we did. And then we had taken the sedimentation count, which measures your infection or inflammation, before the administration of the C, and we took it 4 hours later. And the amazing thing is, I was very excited about this, was that when we took the blood test, it showed a drop of about 8 points in the sedimentation time. Well, my sedimentation time was 115. And that is in the lethal range, and you've got to get down below 80 if you want to go on with affairs. And we did this day after day, increasing it to 12,500 the second day, 15,000, on up to 25,000 units. And day by day, the sedimentation time would drop, so I knew we were on the right track. And on the 8th day, my thumbs began to move without pain. So it was.
Then became a whole process of rediscovery.
That's right. Being able to stand up again. The first time when I stood up, it was like standing on my eyeballs. But you've got to push your body in these cases and force yourself to do things and believe that it's possible. So as I say, most of what I've learned has come about as the result of these illnesses. It's made me a happier man, perhaps.
The cure appears to be complete.
Yes, it is complete. The sedimentation time is way down to 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever